maybe whatever you're doing, there are three ingredients that you need. You need knowledge, you need an imagination, and most of all, you need conviction that this is doable. Because when you're not convinced, you don't understand the why. But once you flip the why, there is more ownership, more passion, more drive, more purpose, right?
And welcome back to CEO Tech Live. I've got a great one coming your way today with Abdul, Razik, Executive Vice President and Global Head of Product and Engineering at AON Plc, the global provider of professional services in over 120 countries with over 55,000 employees. Prior to AON, he served as Vice President at Google, Chief Product Officer at SAP, and other leadership roles at Infosys, at Commerce One, Sybase, and KPMG. Abdul, welcome to CEO Tech Live.
Thank you.
We're going to have a fun one today. So what's your favorite leadership story to tell?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite one is about 15 years ago, the first time I started leading a large team, right? It was a lesson taught to me by the former president of India, President Abdul Kalam. His name is Abdul, coincidentally, too.
Right.
So he told me this story about when he was the head of the Indian Space Research Organization at that time, and he told me a story during his tenure there, where the first time that India launched a satellite, it actually failed.
On his watch.
On his watch.
Wow.
Right. And so there was all these clamor around why did it fail and so on and so forth. And anyway, so he asked the person who was in charge of the project and said, hey, do you know what went wrong? And do you know how to fix it? And the person said, yeah, it'll take me 18 months to fix it. I know what went wrong. And so he said, okay, let's go fix it. And then he got up and took the heat for all the things, the media, everything else, right? 2 years later, they had a successful launch. This time, same scenario. Everybody's now in a different mode, right? Of what went right, how do we celebrate? This is awesome. And the manager was now briefing President Kalam on what to say, what went right, and so on. And this time he said, no, you go tell them that. So the moral of it that I've took away and I've always stuck to it is, in crisis, you lead from the front. And in celebration, you lead from the back.
Oh, fantastic. And how has that played out throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, I've always stuck to that. And, I cherish the fulfillment that I get from seeing somebody else, like building more leaders. Leadership is not about, command and control and things of that nature in my book. It's more about building new leaders, enabling them, empowering them, and things of that nature.
What a story. And I mean, to get that advice from a president / former president, oh my gosh. Wow.
That was
extra impact with that one.
A lot, yeah.
So bring it to your career. When's the time you had an unexpected twist or failure, and how did it lead to your success or growth on down the road?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of, I've gone through, a lot of great companies, and there are, in anything, I always narrow it down to 3 ingredients that you need to perform. And, people call transformation, innovation, whatever the case may be, whatever you're doing, there are 3 ingredients that you need. You need knowledge, you need an imagination, and most of all, you need conviction that this is doable. So there are a few times where, we had the knowledge, there was the imagination, but it always lacked conviction. And in more times than not, that leads to the failure of anything that you embark on. Because when you're not convinced, you don't understand the why. And so the first stumbling block or the first, misstep really shakes your, confidence. And a lot of cases in my career where that has happened, where the lack of conviction sort of.
So it's like belief that it's possible.
Yeah. From like the belief that it's possible, and the conviction that no matter what it takes, I'm going to go achieve that. Right. That's yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I can see that being big, and also as a leader, and with 55,000 employees, thinking about how you instill that.
Yeah.
In them.
And that's the toughest part, right? Yeah. I mean, there is I'm a big follower of Simon Sinek, if you know.
Oh yeah, start with why.
Start with the why,
yeah.
Right. And that start of the why is a great way to instill confidence and conviction. Because once you get people to understand why are we doing something, it then leads to, everybody jumps into the how and the what. And that's typically not very effective in my view.
Was there a moment in your career where maybe you took on a project or a team and they weren't convicted?
Many cases.
And then you worked on that with the why.
Yeah.
And then when that happened, how did the team behave differently? What happened with the project when they?
Yeah, you can see it's a complete 180, right? So from the time people don't understand the why, the dynamics of how people behave, without the why, you're sort of going through the motions of, hey, I need to do this. This is sort of a checklist. But once you flip the why, there is more, ownership, more passion, more drive, more purpose, right? These are things that primarily come from that why part.
Yeah, I like that. I think leaders probably don't spend enough time on crafting that message, getting feedback on why. Make sure some people may not understand it first 10 times they hear it, but to keep at it until you find that magic.
That's absolutely right. I mean, people always underestimate or don't spend enough time on the why, and also when you're leading a large team, to get everybody on the same page. Yeah. I mean, it's a cliche, but when you and I are talking, when I'm talking, I have an image in my head, you have an image in my head. Unless those two images come together, we're probably talking about completely different things, right? And so.
Yeah, so we got to understand the images.
That's right.
In conversation, and then find how to bring them together. I love that metaphor. So before we got going here, you were talking about how you are a sports junkie. And I was like, well, which sports? And you listed off, I think, every sport I'd ever heard of pretty much. How has sports come into play in your career, and how does it inform your leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think sports is a great way of, this notion of a team, right? That's the number one thing in a sport. Sports teams are generally not made out of, ex superstars, but there is a varied spectrum of skills, varied spectrum of personalities, and so on and so forth. And that's true in anything that we do, right? Even within our family. I mean, I have 3 children. They're completely, in a different spectrum, right? And so, so that notion of a team comes from that sport, but, everybody is focused on winning and doing their best and doing their part to achieve the goal of winning, where the common goal is winning and not specifically some individual accolades. Those are all consequences of that, right? So that is one thing that I have always cherished, this notion of a team and building a team and understanding the strengths and weaknesses of a team. The other things that sports has taught me, and I've carried it in my career and life, is this notion of, sometimes you'll get a bad call. Sometimes you'll lose because it was unfair. So you learn to lose, right? You have to learn to lose, right? It's not that you win all the time, but you win you win and lose graciously. So those things come from that foundation of, hey, sometimes life is unfair. Things, even in projects or big programs, things can go wrong. There are things that are not in your control. So it gives you this framework of, hey, do the best of things that are in your control and leave the things that are not in your control outside and deal with that. So that's sort of the...
Well, I've heard said before that success is a terrible teacher.
Yeah. That's
and
right.
Sports, there's plenty of losing because someone loses every single time.
Yeah.
And that's where the learning. Is there a certain time where you were playing a sport that this came up?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in India, obviously everybody plays cricket, and I played decent cricket in India. And very early, we lost a few games where we were the stronger team. The other team was more hungry, and they played better on that day. And so it taught you how to learn, take it in your stride, and then improve and drive towards it, right? So those are things that we do. I still play. So.
Oh yeah. And so, how do you experience losing today?
Yeah, it gives
more wisdom. I don't know.
Yeah, it's mostly losing. You take it, and it obviously it is. It's disappointing when you lose, right? Because you put in the effort and you always want to win, but you take it in stride, and it gives you a perspective that it's not the end all. There is always another day where you can come back stronger. What's that adage? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah. I think about, are you familiar with Timothy Galway's book, The Inner Game of Tennis?
Yeah.
So what, do you remember much about it, or what do you remember when you read it? What came up for you?
I mean, one of the things, it is about this learning to deal with, losing and unfairness and so on. I don't remember much about that, but it resonates being from that foundational view. It resonated with a lot of thoughts that I had, right? And so,
yeah, it's one of the oldest. Well, people say Timothy Galway was maybe the first sports psychologist, because it was written back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But I've heard multiple people, I'm a big tennis player, but I've heard a lot of people in different sports, probably cricket too, that it offers such a foundational insight. And a lot of that is how you think about losing, and don't judge losing as a bad thing, but it's a learning experience.
That's right.
All right. So what advice would you give your younger self, or something that you would encourage them to try?
My younger self. I guess if I were to rewrite some of the things is, during my younger days, I was a lot more conservative and had to have something planned and things of that nature. An advice that I would give to my younger self would be to take a little more risks. Go with the flow sometimes. Not everything is, the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, right? And so, sometimes ambiguity is a friend. Sometimes ambiguity leads you to...
Ambiguity is a friend.
Yeah.
I'll have to remind myself of that.
So not everything is defined. And so, I would do those two things, right? Which is take a little more risk, and then...
Is there a certain, when you said ambiguity can be a friend, is there an example in your career where things were ambiguous and it turned out to be a positive?
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in, there is always a reason for something to happen, and it's always for the good, right? I mean, I follow that.
So it's like a universal higher power.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk in that way, but generally, because when I've looked back, I mean, there are a lot of cases where there are times in my life or career where you made a decision which you thought is the right one, and it turned out to be wrong. And there are cases where you I thought it's the wrong decision. It turned out to be right. And so you only get that perspective looking back, right? As Steve Jobs says, right?
Connecting the dots.
Connecting the dots, right? You can only connect the dots looking backwards, and you hope that you're right. And so I believe in that. When looking back, though, those things seem, at that point in time, it seems so that's where I feel that ambiguity is sometimes okay, that we'll figure it out as you go along if you're smart enough.
There's probably a certain confidence and peacefulness that comes with that. Because when you're facing uncertainty, you can feel like, well, I should know, I want to know, I want my team to plan, like you mentioned, planning. But finding peace in your ability to improvise, to be flexible with what comes your way.
Yeah, exactly. The more stark of that story is, I don't know if you know Captain Sully from the American airline that landed on the Hudson.
Oh, yes. Yeah, oh, my God.
So that's, if you look at that, right? I mean, he was a trained pilot for 45 years or whatever. And in the end, he was judged for the decision that he made in that 200 seconds between the time he lost the two engines and the plane landed in the Hudson, right? So that's
incredible. I remember that day. I was sitting in the airport in New Jersey.
Oh, you were? Okay, wow.
And people were talking about it. Yeah. And I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Right?
Yeah, what a day, man. Because it was a bunch of geese that had flown into the engine.
The two geese, so he lost both engines.
Both engines, yeah. And he responded.
Yeah, in 200, the plane was basically a glider, right, with no power.
What a day. I remember reading, have you read The Checklist Manifesto?
No, I haven't.
By, I'll have to remember, Atul Gawande wrote a book
I've
called
heard
The
of it.
Checklist Manifesto. But he gives that example as one where he went through, solely had a checklist, and how I guess the airline industry is very well known for their checklist.
Yeah.
And they always review their checklist. This is what I do for this. And there was something when you lose both engines, and solely I fell back on my training.
Yeah, exactly. 43 years of training, right?
I had never had this before, but
I don't think he had time to do a checklist.
Where's his checklist? but he went through the mental checklist or his training. Yeah. That's a cool story. Thanks for bringing that up. What's the worst leadership advice you've ever heard?
Yeah, the worst one, early in my career, people would say, hey, you should plan what you should be in 5 years and 10 years and whatever, right? I never planned my career. No. It's just, I never sat down and said, hey, 5 years from today, I want to be this, or 10 years from today, I want to be this. Back to the things that I can control and the things that I cannot control. To me, those things are all a consequence of what I do. But the things that I can control is the work ethic and hard work and passion and things of that nature. So I just stuck to that.
Stuck to your circle of influence.
Yeah. And not worried about, hey, I want to be that. Because, by doing that, you set yourself sometimes high or low expectations, so you could either overachieve or underachieve. And you never want to, limit your potential in doing that. You should have, I'm not saying you shouldn't have goals and ambitions and so on and so forth, but planning everything to the dot sometimes puts you in a box that either, largely limits your potential, in my opinion.
If you focus so much on things that are so far down the road, you may diminish your power to make things happen in the moment.
That's right.
I can see that balance.
Yeah.
So over the years, what's been your biggest source of inspiration? And when's a difficult time that got you through?
Yeah, my source of inspiration, it's always this core belief that, again, back to Steve Jobs, right? He always said that, look around you and, things that are around you are not built by people not much smarter than you. So you always never underestimate the power that you have, right? And so, So we always get enamored into, oh, look at that person. He did such a cool thing. I mean, every individual has the power to do whatever they put their mind to. So it's back to, do you have the knowledge to do that? Do you have the imagination to go capture that? And more importantly, do you have the conviction and drive to go achieve that, right? So that's always helped me through tough times. Wow. I distill it back to first principles, this core sense of belief that anybody can do anything, and this humility around it, right? And I've always followed that as well, which is, people say, executive vice president and this and that and the other, sure. But no job is too small or no job is too big. Right? Everybody, back to the team concept, everybody has a part to play. And so it's what you want to do.
The sense of self, and I'll say, focus on what you can control, and your own potential. Is this something that was instilled in you, or have you always had it from a young age, or?
I guess I've always had it from a young age. I've always lived, with that self. I wouldn't call it. I mean, I was not as a child. I was not a very confident child, but I was very aware of my strengths and my weaknesses, and I constantly worked on my weaknesses. So I guess I always felt I could figure anything out, right? Even tough situations.
Yeah, and you said the word awareness, which with that comes humility, because you're willing to say, these are not my strong points, and then take action on those. So fortify them.
And being vulnerable is not a bad thing, and I do that.
Yeah, and being okay with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and that allows you to build a team around you to support it.
Yeah.
So bring it back to Hexaware. What's been the benefit of working with them?
Yeah, the Hexaware has been a great partner. Like we operate in 120 countries. A lot of projects. Some of them are very complex. We serve a large spectrum of clients, from the large enterprise to the very small businesses. Right. So the breadth and the depth of the businesses is wide and varied, and Hexaware has been a great partner in enabling us to serve our customers better. So that's been a great story.
Thank you for sharing that. Wrapping this up, what's your parting thought for our listeners today?
Yeah. Parting thought. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's mostly individual and personal in nature. Any large or small effort that you do, I'd bring it back to those knowledge, imagination, conviction parameters that'll help you drive through any transformational, or even a small effort, that any small or large effort that you're doing, it'll help through that.
Great note to wrap up on. Thanks for coming on the show today, Abdul.
Thank you.